New Orleans Saints top 3 first round 2024 NFL draft selections. We are here locked on Saints with Ross Jackson. Ladies and gentlemen, in this video, Ross is going to give us his top 3 prospects, the top 3 guys that he wants the Saints to pick in the first round. So this isn't his 3-round mock. This is his top 3 players in the first round he wants the Saints to pick. I probably could guess them because everyone is listing the same 3 players. Quick draft note before we get going. A lot of people have asked me, what am I planning for the draft? What am I going to do for the draft? I will have more information upcoming in future videos this weekend, but I will be live streaming the first round of the draft. I'll be reacting to it live, so come hang out there. If you're just watching the draft, I'll be streaming as of right now. I will be streaming on Twitch, and I'll be streaming on Twitter. So on my Twitter channel or profile and on my Twitch channel, for sure. Maybe some other ones, but definitely those 2. Again, more details will be coming forth this weekend. So, top 3 prospects for the Saints at pick 14. Who do I think it is? One is obviously Fashanu, Olu Fashanu from Penn State. Every single person in known human history besides me has the Saints picking him at 14. This duck has given me an interesting look, and I don't know if I like it. Fashanu is going to be one. Another one is going to be probably some edge. The problem with the edge is, how do we get there at 14? That's the biggest problem. Dallas Turner would have to slide, or we'd have to trade up, I guess. Both don't seem likely. If you don't take Turner, if Turner's not there, then you probably have to take Jared Verse. Jared Verse at 14 is a bit of a reach. Latu is probably higher up on mocks than Verse at this point, if I had to guess. So I'll say, okay, so I'm guess Fashanu, trade up for Dallas Turner. Who would be 3? 3, again, like I'm the only person saying Bowers. Bowers is, I think, a realistic person at 14. But like a wide receiver, like if you're going to say Malik Neighbors or Dunze, like, again, you're going to have to trade up to get them. So I don't think he's going to go that route. Who's the cat? Who's the lineman from Washington? Fautanu? I'll say Fautanu. So I think Ross is going to say Fautanu, and trade up for Dallas Turner. That's my guess.
I've got my top 3 selections for the New Orleans Saints in this year's 2024 NFL mock draft in the first round. And number 1 is not an offensive tackle. We got all that and a little bit of lanyard for you on today's episode.
Who the hell is number 1 going to be? Whoa. Ross just threw me for a little bit of a loop there. I mean, if 1 isn't a tackle at 14, so he's not talking about trading out. Oh, all right, Ross, you've piqued my interest.
Episode of Locked On Saints.
Okay. Yeah. What's going on here? We on fire? Is that a welding?
You are Locked On
What is
Saints.
happening?
Your daily New Orleans Saints
right.
Today's episode, and we appreciate you very much,
Jesus.
as always, for making us your first. New Orleans Saints are on the clock at pick 14, at least.
Jesus.
We think they'll be on the clock at 14. We'll see what happens. With my top 3 selections for the New Orleans Saints at pick 14. So I want to break it all down. I want to start off with number 1 right here, which is not an offensive tackle. Everybody and their mama expects the New Orleans Saints to draft an offensive tackle. I expect them to draft an offensive tackle. My mama expects them to draft an offensive tackle. Shout out to you, mama. But the first thing I wanted to look at, or the first prospect that I want to look at, is actually the guy that I think, if he's on the board at 14, he's the best player in the draft. He's the best player on the board at that time. He's not the best player.
This is interesting. I'm really racking my brain because I'm not going to lie to you. It kind of sounds like he's going to say Brock Bowers. Like, who at 14 would be the quote-unquote best player available that isn't a tackle that the Saints would draft? Because obviously it's not going to be like J.J. McCarthy or someone like that. The Saints wouldn't draft him. So who the hell is it going to be?
Player in the draft. Best player in the draft is probably Marvin Harrison Jr., the wide receiver out of Ohio State, followed probably pretty closely by the other wide receivers before you get to Caleb Williams, but that might be a controversy.
That is absolutely not true. I mean, that is not even close. That's not even, I mean, that's shocking to hear right there.
Opinion. So my number 1 guy in terms of who might realistically be available for the New Orleans Saints at 14 is Alabama defensive end Dallas.
Okay, it's what I said at the beginning. How is he going to be there at 14? The only way he's there at 14 is if Atlanta trades out of 8, but then they'd have to trade, because here's what you got to think about with Atlanta too. Atlanta wants defense. They're going to go defense. Atlanta knows the Saints need Dallas Turner too, right? So you're telling me Atlanta is going to trade down so far that they're going to allow their division rival to draft the guy that they want? No way. So, okay, what's the other alternative? The other alternative is that the Falcons draft a different defensive end. They draft Jared Verse or something. They go that route. And if that's the case, that kind of throws a wrench into the system of Dallas Turner being the best player in the draft or whatever. If he's not even the first player at his position picked, not saying that, the first player picked is always the best in the draft, but I just don't see a way we can get Turner because it's the Falcons. The Falcons aren't going to trade with us. We're not going to be able to go from 14 to 8 to take Turner. Why would the Falcons do that? So the Falcons have to trade the pick, and then we have to basically, Atlanta's going to have to trade the pick to a team that doesn't want Turner. They're going to have to trade to Minnesota, who wants to go up to take J.J. McCarthy. So then we would then have to jump over, I think Minnesota's at 11. So we would have to trade to 10 with the Jets and then take Turner there. But I don't see how that happens.
Turner. Now, some of you hear that name, hear me say that, and you go, oh, yeah, okay, that makes sense, because I've kind of talked about it here on the show before. But like I said, I want to look at it all in fresh eyes. For me, if Dallas Turner is on the board at 14, and in case you missed it, I did a mock draft Monday a couple weeks ago where it wasn't just me doing a mock draft. It wasn't just a computer doing a mock draft. It was a bunch of insiders, writers doing a mock draft. And at 14, I was able to take Dallas Turner. And the reason why I like Dallas Turner is because he's different. He is and would be, under most circumstances, the best player available on the board if he's available at 14, unless there is some inexplicable tumble, right?
If Dallas Turner is available at 14, the Saints better, Usain Bolt, sprint from the to the podium with the card and turn it in. You know how it shows now on the clock and then 2 minutes or whatever? It should say now on the clock, ooh, pick is in. It shouldn't even finish. It shouldn't even start the countdown if Dallas Turner is available.
Inexplicable tumble for one of the wide receivers, somehow one of the quarterbacks, whatever it might be, Joe Alt, whatever. For me, Dallas Turner would very likely be the best player on the board if he's on the board when the New Orleans Saints select at pick 14. Why? One thing that I look at is the void that he fills. I think that the Saints...
How the hell, this is one of those things where, defending this pick, there shouldn't be any need to defend the pick. There shouldn't be any reasoning. Dallas Turner is one of our biggest needs. Dallas Turner is a legit game changer, a legitimate, consensus best defensive player in the draft kind of a guy. If he falls, ladies and gentlemen, we're not sitting at 9. We're not sitting at pick 6. We're at 14. So if you're telling me the best defensive player in the draft falls to 14, and it just so happens to be a need that we have, go get him immediately. And I'll tell you this too. You get Dallas Turner, and all of a sudden, let's say Chase Young is good, let's say Dallas Turner is good. The Saints, just like that, go from having absolutely no pass rush to a really good, really young pass rush. Sidebar, at the Pelicans game on Tuesday, the Lakers collapse, or when we almost came back against the Lakers, Chase Young was there. Chase Young was right there at courtside. He was a couple rows in front of me. Not a flex or anything, but fastest rising media superstar in New Orleans. But Chase Young was a man of the people. He was talking to everybody, shaking hands, seemed very personable, seemed very people could walk up to him. He was patting everybody on the back. He was so love to see that from Chase. What a guy.
Saints learned something with Caden Ellis. They learned something with Zach Bond, that it makes a lot of sense to have speed off the edge. Now, they brought some of that in with Chase Young, but is Chase Young a longer term situation? No, he's on a 1-year deal. He's effective.
Okay, that part's not true either. He might be a long term. If he's good, he will be. If Chase Young is really good, the Saints will extend Chase Young, and he'll be a pivotal part of this defense for years to come.
On a game-to-game deal, if you really think about it, right? Because almost his entire contract, $8 million of the $13 million on his 1-year deal is all based on whether or not he plays throughout the season. And so, or on a per game basis, bonuses, right? And so I don't know that you can look at Chase Young as a long-term option yet. Now, if he has a great time in New Orleans and has a great, year there and then decides that he wants to stick around here, then sure. But then you still have to be ready for the eventual departure of Cam Jordan. So bring in somebody that brings you something that you don't have, and that's 4.4 speed on the defensive line. And that's where I think a guy like Dallas Turner, who fits the prototype of Caden Ellis, who fits the prototype of a Zach Bond.
He does not fit the prototype of Zach Bond. Dallas Turner, like Caden Ellis and Zach Bond, mediocre. God love them, but mediocre. Dallas Turner is not that. Dallas Turner is a stud. You can prototype him with whatever defensive end, high level elite defensive end you like, because that's who you're hoping you're going to get with Dallas Turner.
Type that can come in and just wreck shop for you constantly and help you against those pesky mobile quarterbacks that are always causing you trouble and all those other things. So for me, the number one guy for me that's going to potentially be on the board, or could realistically be on the board for the New Orleans Saints,
could not realistically be on the board,
Dallas Turner. So that's my number one guy.
Fashanu is going to be
the edge rusher out of Alabama. He's numero uno for me. He would come in at 6'2", 247 pounds. He is Dane Brugler's number one edge rusher in this year's class. So if he's there, it makes perfect sense. Number two for me is, of course, Olu Fashanu, the offensive tackle out of Penn State. Now,
we've talked about this a million times. We've talked about this at length about how, it's a little questionable sometimes of like how good are these players? How good are the linemen all kind of similar? You just kind of throwing darts. If you are throwing darts, does it make sense to trade down and take Amarius Mims, or, take another tackle? Like there's all kind of I probably have 5 hours of video of me just talking about this, probably more than that, to be honest. But so I won't belabor the point, but I have been thinking, okay, go with me on my trip into Fantasyland here. Let's say the Chargers trade out of 5, or let's say the Chargers go a different direction. Everyone right now has Joe Alt going to the Chargers at 5, but let's say the Chargers decide we're going to trade to 11 with Minnesota. So that Minnesota can come get JJ McCarthy. We're going to take a wide receiver. Let's just say they do something nuts. And let's say Alt's on the board at like 7. 7 is Tennessee. Tennessee has been mocked to take Alt if the Chargers move out of 5. But let's say Tennessee does something crazy. Let's say Tennessee takes a wide receiver. They've been mocked to take a wide receiver. A lot of them have Odunze going to Tennessee. If Alt is on the board past Tennessee, and you're at like pick 8, because Atlanta's not going to take him. Atlanta's set at offensive line. So if Alt is sitting there at 9, I would be all for the Saints trading up for Joe Alt. I'd be all for them moving from 14 to 9 or 14 to 10, wherever they think they got to go to get him, if he slips past 5. Because if he slips past 5, you start getting into the world where it's like, well, there's really only one team that's going to take him. The Jets could take him at 10 to protect Aaron Rodgers. So you start thinking about trading up if he gets past 8. If he gets past 7, because then 8, he's not going to go 8. So Joe Alt is a guy where if you have your finger on the pulse and you think Los Angeles is going to move out of 5, you start thinking about how can we move up, how can we maneuver to go get Joe Alt. Superstar left tackle, he is a prototype type guy. He's a prototype left tackle. He's the best prospect we've seen on the offensive line in the last 2 years. stud. He is a cut above the rest of the offensive linemen. So I have been kind of tinkering with the idea of like maybe you know, if you watch the board and if Mickey and them are proactive in the war room and you're watching it and he gets past 5, maybe you think, okay, we could probably get to it. We could probably maneuver a package, from 14 to that 9 universe. But I don't think it's going to happen. But since we're on the topic of offensive linemen, thought I would throw it out there.
For me, Olu Fashanu is a guy that creates some intrigue for you if you were to draft him as the New Orleans Saints, because he is a pure left tackle, the number 2 offensive tackle on our good friend Dane Brugler's board. Now, the tricky part with him is that if you're drafting him at left tackle, or if you're drafting him, you're effectively playing him at left tackle. Now, you can let him play out at right tackle if you want to. You could do that. If Trevor Penning, shows up and looks really good and you're ready to roll with him and he's ready to roll in the new offensive system that might cater really well towards Trevor Penning, but Ryan Ramczyk isn't ready to go, then maybe that's where Olu Fashanu can start. But look, he's played 29 career collegiate games during his time over at Penn State, and all of them were at left tackle. So you're in the same situation with an Olu Fashanu as you are with a Trevor Penning, right? He plays left tackle. He's set at left tackle. That's probably.
So I was kind of early on this philosophy of like the first person that was kind of saying like, has anyone mentioned that we drafted Trevor Penning? Does anybody mention that? Like everyone just says like the Saints need a left tackle, the Saints need a left tackle, the Saints need Fashanu. But I haven't heard a single person say, well, they actually did just use a first-round pick on Trevor Penning. Maybe they do want to play him. Maybe he is developing. Maybe they do have a plan. And maybe Ryan Ramczyk's knee is going to hold up. Like, maybe, I'm not saying that offensive line we don't need, but maybe it isn't so obvious. Everyone's made this seem very obvious, but I think the Saints have a little more complexity to their to pick 14 than people are giving them credit for.
Probably where you're going to play him. Now, if you want to be prepared for Trevor Penning to be ready to go at left tackle, right? Which is kind of best case scenario for New Orleans, right? It's the first round pick that you invested a couple years ago. Best case scenario is that he works great in this new offense and works out at left tackle. That would bring me to the number 3 guy on this list.
Okay, we're skipping past Fashanu. Now it sounds like Ross is leading us into believing that Penning's the left tackle. So then what do you do there? I think he's going to say you take a guard, which is who the hell even knows? All the offensive linemen to me are the same. They can all play every position. They're all just interchangeable. That's honestly how I feel about it. He could say Fuaga. He could say Fautanu. He could say Kevin Mawai for all I care. All the offensive linemen, you just throw them all in a hat, do a little bit of this, pull out a name. The Saints drafted Fuaga. Okay, and then that's it. And then 2 years from now, people forgot about the pick. No one knows how good he is. And then, in the offseason, everyone's being like, we should take an offensive lineman. And then I'm sitting here screaming from the rooftops because we passed up on the next Travis Kelce.
Which is Washington offensive lineman Troy Fautanu. Now, Fautanu is my good friend Kyle Crabb's number 2 corner on his board. He's a huge fan of Troy Fautanu. Now, he comes in at sub 6'4", which might make you think he can't play left tackle, but he can. 34 and a quarter inch arms. He's got the length to be able to do it. He's got everything that he needs to be able to pull that off. And then here's the thing. Let's say that he doesn't end up winning that left tackle spot because Trevor Penning looks really good at left tackle. Well, then Fautanu can play at left guard.
Can you imagine if after all this, we're talking about offensive linemen, and we take Fautanu, Penning looks good, Penning's playing at left tackle, and we come out of pick 14 with a transitionary offensive lineman who went from left tackle to play left guard? That's what we ended up doing. I mean, and this kind of shows you too. This kind of shows you my big problem with offensive line, where it's like, I mean, could you think about a different position? Think about being like, let's draft Cooper DeJean at 14 And if he doesn't work out at cornerback, just play him at safety. It's like, well, I mean, if you're in that position where you're not even sure where the pick is going to play, you're not even sure what's going on, maybe you should look at a different position. You know, like, can you imagine sitting here and being like, yeah, let's take Fautanu, move him to left guard, and passing up on like Jared Verse to do that, and passing up on Brock Bowers to do that. You know, like, that's my thing with this offensive line talk, is that it's just so uncreative. It's just so 1 + 1 = 2. You know, like, you could have made the whole top 3 prospects could have just been Fashanu, Fautanu, and Fuaga. There you go. Boom. And you know what everyone's going to say if you did that? If you did a million mock drafts and you took a combination of Fuaga, Fautanu, and Fashanu, these names are killing me. If you took a combination of those in all your mock drafts and they were graded, every grade would be like a B, B+, B, B, A, B, B+. Because no one gets burned for taking an offensive lineman. No one gets burned for that. But I just don't see it. I just don't see wanting to take a left guard. When you got, and again, this is his top 3. I mean, for God's sakes, he said Dallas Turner. So we're operating with a little bit of leeway here. Brock Bowers is probably on the board. Keon Coleman's on the board. Jared Verse is on the board. Latu's on the board. You know, all these people are on the board. Cooper DeJean's on the board. Should he go at 14? No, but he's still big-time players are on the board. Big-time players are out there. Big-time players are on the board. And you're telling me one of the top 3 is a left guard? Is a guy who you're asking him to play a different position and play a left guard? You can't get that at pick 28? You can't trade down, get some draft capital, and take another one of these 15 offensive linemen and move them to guard? I mean, I just don't know. I don't know how we're not off the offensive line thing. Like, when I see lists and I still see this combination, it's always this. It's the same. It's all the same. It's Fautanu, Fashanu, and Fuaga. It's always those 3. Why? Because those are probably the top 3 rated on whoever Mel Kiper's board. And so no one's even thinking about Amarius Mims or any of the other offensive linemen that you can get later in the draft. I'm fine with taking an offensive lineman. I'm not fine taking an offensive lineman and moving them to left guard and passing up on players like I just listed 30 seconds ago. Take your left tackle that you're moving to guard in the 2nd round. It's that easy. Take Latu. Take Jared Verse. And then come back around and take whoever and move them to guard. I mean, it just seems like the easiest thing in the world. I just, you know, I mean, the more I read comments, especially on my channel, the more I read comments and tweets and all that stuff, the more I think people are coming around to this idea. And the more they're like, whoa, okay, it does make sense. Okay, this actually does make sense to maybe look outside of offensive line. Maybe it does make sense that you can go get an offensive lineman in free agency or draft an offensive lineman in the 4th round, 5th round, whatever. You know, we have multiple picks in the 5th and the 7th. Can we move up to the 4th, take a lineman there? You know, free agency, what have you. I mean, if you get the Chase Young equivalent, so however good you think Chase Young is as a defensive end, let's pretend you could sign that same equivalent at left guard. Would you be cool with that? I would. I'd be totally fine with that. I'd be totally fine with drafting another position and signing a, 76 overall, if we're talking in Madden terminology, a 76 overall left guard. Sure. Who do you think is the best left guard in the NFL? Anybody in the comments want to throw names out there? I have no idea. I watch more NFL than virtually anybody. I have no clue. I would just be guessing. I really would. I'd just be guessing. I'd just be guessing at the best left guard. Best right guard, who the hell knows? You could tell me anybody. You know, I think the majority is swaying. You know, 2 weeks ago, everybody was saying O-line, 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 O-line. The more videos I've made, the more we've talked about it, the more examples we've given, the more discussion we've had, the more I'm starting to hear. You'll hear the Travis Pastrana Nitro Circus going on outside here. The more I'm hearing people willing to have a conversation about a different position. You know, like these three prospects, right? The first prospect was Dallas Turner. Then you go 2 offensive linemen. Why don't you go Turner, Fashanu, and Latu? Or Turner, Fashanu, and Verse? If your number 1 is an edge rusher, wouldn't you rather have like the second best edge rusher, whoever you think that is, versus a sort of kind of left guard? I would.
Fautanu could potentially play at right tackle if he needed it.
We got a right tackle now.
As long as you give him the offseason to adjust to that, because he has that multi-positional versatility, which allows you to maximize your 5 best on your offensive line. So if you're able to build an offensive line of a Trevor Penning that's ready to go, a Troy Fautanu at left guard, an Eric McCoy at center, a Cesar Ruiz at right guard, and then a Ryan Ramczyk at the top of the season at right tackle, if he's ready to go, you're in a pretty good spot. You feel pretty good about that. Or you swap Fautanu and Penning if you feel like you can put him in at guard. You move, or one of those multi-positional versatility, which allows you to maximize your 5 best on your offensive line. So if you're able to build an offensive line of a Trevor Penning that's ready to go, a Troy Fautanu at left guard, an Eric McCoy at center, a Cesar Ruiz at right guard, and then a Ryan Ramczyk at the top of the.
So I replayed it to hear the list of names you just said. You could have said this after Trevor Penning's draft, right? You could have said, I mean, you're building an offensive line with Trevor Penning and da-da-da-da-da. And then a year later, you're like, we might need to draft a left tackle. You know? So next year, instead of saying Trevor Penning and Fautanu and this, we could be sitting here saying like, well, turns out Fautanu wasn't ready to play. So now we got to draft another left guard. Now we got to draft a right tackle. You draft Fautanu, like think about how cooked you'd be. You draft Fautanu thinking he's going to play right tackle. You put him at left guard. He can't play. And then let's say Ramczyk's knee's busted. Now you've wasted a 14th overall pick. You got nothing to show for it. And now you got to figure out how to fill 2 offensive line positions because now you just keep throwing draft picks at it. You haven't filled anything. Oh, and you didn't address pass rusher. Oh, and you didn't address a playmaker on offense. What are you going to do now?
The season at right tackle, if he's ready to go, you're in a pretty good spot. You feel pretty good about that. Or you swap Fautanu and Penning if you feel like you can put him in at guard. You move, or one of those guys plays at right tackle because Ryan Ramczyk's not ready, or you draft another tackle because the draft is more than 1 round that you could potentially have at right tackle. Lots of options for New Orleans.
So now, okay, so let me get this straight. So now you're drafting Fautanu. You're putting him at left tackle, or Fashanu. You're putting him at left tackle. You're moving Penning to left guard. And then you're drafting another offensive lineman to put at right tackle in case Ramczyk can't walk. Is that what's going on? So now we're drafting 2 offensive linemen. So now our offensive line is Trevor Penning or Fashanu. Then left guard is Trevor Penning or someone else. I don't know. I don't know if I like this.
Orleans.
Let's just draft all offensive linemen. Let's just, for the next 3 years, let's just draft every pick we have, offensive linemen. And then out of those 25 people we draft, we just Sudoku puzzle the best 5 of those 25. And then after that, we'll have a decent line. And we can go 8 and 9 and get 3rd in the division. Because the offensive line doesn't matter. Third offensive line last year was the Colts, and 4th was the Falcons. So we can spend 25 picks, assemble the Avengers of the offensive line, and then, punt from the 50. Sounds like a plan, man.
And Fautanu would just take those options and multiply them effectively because he would give you somebody that you can move where you need somebody. and he changes the way that you call plays because he's nimble on his feet. He's athletic as all get out. He's got fantastic footwork. He would be a fantastic fit in this new offensive scheme for the New Orleans Saints. I did not.
I'm kind of interested. I'm kind of interested to hear from Clint Kubiak. He's talking about changing how you call plays. I don't think a left guard has ever changed how people call plays. And I guarantee you, Fautanu, if we drafted Fautanu, it wouldn't change anything of how Clint Kubiak was going to call plays. But it's kind of crazy because Clint Kubiak gets named as the new OC. I have not seen or heard anything with Clint Kubiak. I haven't seen a picture of him in Saints gear. Every picture of him in Saints gear is photoshopped from his San Francisco days. I have yet to see him at a practice, at a facility, in an interview. I haven't seen him on Twitter. I haven't seen him on Instagram. I haven't seen him on Zanga. I haven't seen him on MySpace. I haven't seen him on AIM chat. I haven't seen him in Yahoo pool rooms. You a real one if you were in Yahoo pool rooms. And you're also a bit of a deviant if you were in Yahoo pool rooms. Because, listen, the last thing that was going on in Yahoo pool rooms in 2002 were a couple of hombres playing Yahoo pool, if you know what I'm saying. If you know what I'm saying. Okay, if you don't know what I'm saying, that's probably for the better, to be honest.
Not have any wide receivers on the list here, but I still want to talk wide receiver because it's their other big need. So let's take a look at the...
We are not going to do that. We just wanted to talk about the top 3 prospects. My top 3 prospects off the top of my dome would be Brock Bowers, number 1. Number 2 would be, I'm not going to say Dallas Turner because I don't think he's going to be there. I'd go Bowers. Then I'd probably go... Bowers. I'm between Latu and Verse. I'll go Bowers, Latu, and then my third would be the trade down offensive lineman, or trade down my third. If trade down wasn't possible, then I would be okay with Fashanu, but only if I couldn't trade down. I would much rather trade down, take a Marius Mims, or trade down, take Verse, take a offensive lineman in the second round, whatever. I'd much rather that. So my top 3, Bowers, Latu, trade down. There you go. That's my 3. Without getting unrealistic and saying, like, my number 1 is trade up for Joe Alt. My number 2 is trade up for Malik Neighbors. So that's mine. Ladies and gentlemen, get on down there in the comment section below. Tell me your top 3 prospects for the Saints to pick at number 14. Ladies and gentlemen, I will see you in the next video.